When 15-year-old Sarah Malek's life fell apart after her father's sudden death, the world around her dimmed into silence. No smiles, no laughter, only the echo of loss heavy in every room of their home. Her mother Nadia worked double shifts, leaving Sarah and her 7-year-old brother Hamza alone most evenings. Their house felt hollow, the kind of hollow that grief creates, loud in its quietness, heavy in its emptiness. One rainy afternoon, as Sarah walked home from school, she noticed something unusual near the abandoned park by their street. A small dog, soaked from the storm, shivering violently under a broken bench. He was thin, ribs showing, fur patched, and one of his paws looked bruised. Sarah hesitated at first. She'd never owned a dog. Didn't know how to handle one, but when he lifted his head and looked straight at her, something in his eyes hit her heart like a punch. They weren't normal dog eyes. They held fear, pain, and something else. Something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She knelt slowly, whispering softly, "Hey buddy, it's okay." The dog whimpered and limped toward her, collapsing right at her feet, as if trusting her was his last strength. Without thinking, she scooped him up, her school bag falling in the mud. He was lighter than she expected, heartbreakingly light. She carried him home through the rain, ignoring the cold water soaking her clothes. When Nadia came home, she was shocked but instantly understood why Sarah looked so protective of the fragile animal resting on a towel. They rushed him to a small local vet who said the dog had been abandoned for weeks and had survived on sheer will. "He's lucky you found him when you did," the vet said. "He wouldn't have survived another storm." Hamza, who rarely smiled after their father's death, hugged the dog gently and whispered, "We'll call him Shadow." Because he followed Sarah home like her shadow. And so Shadow became part of their broken little family, sleeping outside Hamza's room, wagging his tail whenever Sarah entered the house, sitting beside Nadia when she cried quietly at night. Within weeks, Shadow brought life back to the house. Hamza laughed again. Sarah started talking more, and even Nadia found moments of peace. But Shadow wasn't like other dogs. He sensed things, felt emotions almost before they happened. When Sarah had nightmares, Shadow would scratch her door until she let him in, curling beside her until she calmed. When Hamza accidentally cut his hand, Shadow barked non-stop minutes before it happened, as if warning them. And when a stranger walked too close to Sarah on a dark street, Shadow growled before the man even spoke. Soon, Shadow became their protector, healer, and emotional anchor. But strange things started happening too. One night, while studying late, Sarah heard a low growl from the living room. When she went to check, Shadow was staring intensely at the front door, body stiff, ears back, teeth slightly showing. "Shadow, what's wrong?" she whispered. He didn't move, didn't blink, as if he sensed something outside. Sarah peeked through the window. Nothing. Empty street. But Shadow growled again, deeper this time. It wasn't a random dog sound. It was warning. Days later, a neighbor mentioned seeing suspicious men wandering around late at night. But Sarah didn't connect it until the evening she was followed home by someone in a black hoodie. Shadow sensed it before she did, barking and pulling her inside. That's when she realized Shadow wasn't just a rescue dog. He was something else, something between guardian and instinct, fear and courage. And then came the night everything changed. Nadia was working late, Hamza asleep, and Sarah was finishing homework when the power suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the house, silent and thick. Sarah reached for her phone flashlight, but before she could turn it on, Shadow stood up, growling at the back door. The hairs on his back rose. His body blocked Sarah protectively. She whispered, "Shadow," but then she heard heavy footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, coming toward the door. She froze, her breath caught in her chest. Shadow bared his teeth, stepping forward like a soldier ready for war. The footsteps stopped. The doorknob turned. Someone was trying to break in. Sarah stumbled backward as Shadow lunged toward the door, barking with a fierceness she had never seen before. His growls echoed through the house like a warning siren, sharp and vicious, vibrating with pure instinct. The doorknob rattled again, this time harder, more aggressively. Sarah grabbed her phone, trembling as she called 15, whispering, "Someone's trying to break into my house." Before she could finish the sentence, the wooden door shook violently as if someone had slammed their full weight into it. Hamza woke up upstairs, screaming, "Apa, apa." Sarah was about to run toward the stairs, but Shadow blocked her path. He wanted her behind him. The lock on the door cracked. Someone outside whispered something Sarah couldn't hear, but the tone was chilling. She backed up, pushing Hamza behind her when he reached the staircase, crying and shaking. Shadow growled louder, each sound more desperate, more protective. Suddenly, the back door burst open with a crash. A tall man in a dark hoodie stepped inside, breathing heavily. His eyes scanned the house in seconds before locking onto Sarah and Hamza. "There you are," he muttered. Shadow attacked before he could take a step. The dog launched himself at the intruder with terrifying determination, biting at his leg and pulling him down. The man screamed, trying to shake Shadow off, but the dog held on with the strength of a creature fighting for his family's lives. Sarah grabbed Hamza and ran toward the front door. but the intruder managed to throw Shadow against a cabinet. The crash was loud, too loud, and Shadow whimpered in pain. Nitrate monoxide. Sarah screamed as Shadow struggled to stand. The intruder limped toward them, grabbing a long kitchen knife from the counter. Hamza shrieked and Sarah shielded him with her body. The man raised the knife and then Shadow did the impossible. Despite his pain, he lunged again, this time aiming for the man's hand. His jaws clamped around the attacker's wrist, twisting it with brutal force until the knife clattered to the floor. The intruder roared in agony, punching Shadow repeatedly, but the dog didn't let go. Sarah grabbed Hamza's arm and shouted, "Run!" But before they could reach the living room, another figure appeared at the doorway, a second intruder, a woman, dressed in all black. She grabbed Sarah's hair and yanked her backward. Sarah screamed as Hamza tried to punch the woman, but he was too small. The woman snarled, "We told your mother we'd collect the money. If she didn't pay, we'd take something worth more." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Blackmail, extortion, threats Nadia had hidden from them. Suddenly, the woman pushed Hamza aside and raised a hand to strike Sarah. But Shadow, bleeding, limping, and breathing heavily, still found the strength to throw himself at her. He crashed into her with full force, knocking her onto the glass table, shattering it beneath her. The house rang with the sound of breaking glass and screams. Shadow pulled Sarah toward the door, nudging her fiercely. "He wants us to run," Sarah gasped. She grabbed Hamza and bolted outside while Shadow stayed inside, fighting both intruders. Outside, rain poured heavily, turning the yard into mud. Sarah's heart beat wildly as she dragged Hamza down the driveway. Behind them, the man roared, "Get the dog off me," followed by Shadow's furious barking. Blue and red police lights flashed at the top of the street. The neighbors had called. The police rushed into the house with guns drawn. Sarah collapsed on the wet ground, sobbing while holding Hamza. After a few minutes that felt like hours, officers emerged carrying Shadow, bleeding, exhausted, barely conscious. "We need to get him to an emergency vet now," an officer said. Sarah screamed, "Shadow, please don't die." The officer placed him gently into the police car. Despite the pain, Shadow lifted his head and looked at Sarah with soft, loyal eyes. Even then, even half dying, he tried to wag his tail. As they sped toward the animal hospital, Sarah held his paw and whispered, "You saved us. Please hold on." Shadow closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. Machines beeped as vets rushed him into surgery. Sarah, Hamza, and Nadia waited outside, trembling. The doctor came out only once to say the words no one ever wants to hear. "It's critical." Night turned into sunrise as they waited for news. Then the doctor walked in again, but this time, he was smiling. Shadow opened his eyes slowly the next morning, vision blurry, body wrapped in bandages and connected to tubes. Sarah gasped and ran to him, tears streaming down her face. Hamza hugged his snout gently, whispering, "Shadow, you came back." Nadia kissed his head repeatedly, crying harder than she had during her husband's funeral. The vet smiled warmly. "This dog survived injuries. Dogs rarely survive. He fought harder than any animal I've seen." But Shadow hadn't just survived, he became a hero. The police arrived to take statements and informed the family that the intruders were part of a criminal gang who had targeted single mothers. Shadow's fierce resistance had slowed them enough for police to arrive on time. "Your dog protected you better than most trained guard animals," an officer said proudly. Shadow remained in the hospital for a week. During that time, the story spread across the neighborhood. People brought toys, blankets, and donations to help pay for his surgery. Kids made handmade, get-well Shadow cards. Even strangers came to meet the brave dog who fought two criminals alone. When Shadow finally came home, weak but alive, the whole street welcomed him like a returning soldier. Sarah decorated a corner of their living room with pillows, soft blankets, and a little sign reading, "Shadow's Kingdom." Hamza placed his favorite toy car beside him every night, saying, "King Shadow needs a royal guard." But something deeper changed too. For the first time in months, their house felt warm, alive, full of the love they had lost when their father died. Shadow had filled the emptiness with loyalty so fierce, it had rewritten their fate. As weeks passed, Shadow healed. But he also grew more attached to them, especially Sarah. He followed her everywhere. To school gates, to the park, even to the bathroom door. He watched Hamza like a guardian angel, sleeping at his bedside until the boy drifted off. And at night, he lay beside Nadia's chair as she finally began to smile again. One evening, while the family sat together watching old videos of their father, Shadow suddenly stood up and placed his paw on a picture frame. It was their father holding baby Sarah. Nadia gasped softly. "He knows," Hamza whispered. Somehow, in ways they couldn't understand, Shadow sensed their grief and healed it. Months passed peacefully until one summer afternoon when the mayor's office contacted them. Shadow was to receive an official bravery medal for saving the Malik family. The ceremony was beautiful. Children clapped. Reporters took photos, and Sarah held Shadow's face in her hands as she whispered, "You're not just our dog, you're our miracle." But Shadow's biggest moment came during the speech. The mayor said, "Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they have fur." The crowd erupted in cheers as Shadow barked proudly. That night, as they walked home under the streetlights, Nadia said softly, "Your father must be smiling. Shadow was sent to us for a reason." Sarah nodded, tears shining in her eyes. The house glowed warmly as they entered. The same house that once felt empty now felt complete. Shadow curled on his favorite blanket, looking at the family he had saved in, not just from harm, but from sadness. Hamza kissed his head. "Shadow, you're not a dog. You're our superhero." And Shadow, with soft eyes and a gentle wag of his tail, seemed to whisper back, "I'll protect you forever."